Hey Bashers, in this video we have the Arrma Fireteam 6S, and this is the slider version. This is video 2 in the series. In video 1 we went over this, and this is used, so we bought it used. It's not perfect, it's used, but in video 1 we went over everything we have here. So we checked out all of the suspension, we checked out everything from the axles, we pulled all of the diffs out, and we went over all that in the first one. We found out that all of the diffs needed a little bit of fluid. The center one was actually in pretty good shape, but both of the ends needed to be shimmed and they needed quite a bit of fluid. So I'm glad we did that. In this video, we're gonna get this thing up and running, and that's quite a thing, really. We're going to make this the equivalent of one you would get out of the box. So we have to put the parts in it. We're not going to do any upgrades. This is just a matter of putting the parts in it to make it functional, and we're going to track all of the costs for that. This should be pretty cool. Check this out. But before we get down on the bench, let's go over a few of the parts we're going to use. And this is kind of, you know, if you watch the channel, you know we like to use stock running gear. These things are designed for a certain amount of power, and that's what we like to keep in them. There's a couple reasons for that. One, we figured they're designed that way, and so they should last pretty good with that. But secondly, we run the stock running gear, so if ours does it, yours should be able to do it. We do upgrade durability, but usually we keep the stock drivetrain. So here's what we got here. We're going to put the stock motor in it. So this is a Spectrum 2050. It has the heat sink on it. Secondly, if you guys have paid attention to the older ones, they came with this. This is the BLX 185. And these things, I really have had excellent luck with these things. So these will run 3S to 6S, which gives you a wide range of speeds you can play with it at. If you're new to the hobby, you can kick it down to 3S, put a 3S battery in it, run it around, get familiar with it. You can put a 4S in it, and then when you feel like getting some, you can go ahead and put a 6S in it. These handle it. Now the thing about it is, we've run plenty of those Spectrum 150s from the version 1 and the version 2, and we've had a few of those go down. They've had their own problems. We've never had one of these fail, so that's why I like these. To control all that, we had to get a receiver. So this is an SR315 from Spectrum, and it's a 3-channel receiver. They're small, they're light, but what I really like about these is right here there's a button. So you push the button, turn the vehicle on, push the button on the transmitter, turn that on, and they bind just like that. It's really slick. You have to run through a little setup, but once you do that, you're up and running, and that's really cool. Now, to control the vehicle, you have to have servos, and this is a Fireteam, so it takes 2. Now, our slider was used, and it did come with the rear servo in it, and that's the stock one. If that's working, we're going to leave that one in. If it has problems, we have 2 of these 35 kilogram VTEC servos, and everything's purchased off eBay. These are really inexpensive. We've never had a 35 kg go down, and we have a lot of our vehicles have these in them. So these are a real good budget servo to get. We haven't had any trouble with these. I did blow up a 25 kg, but that was totally on me. And what happened with that was I put a new bell crank set, an aluminum bell crank set in my Creighton, and I didn't check the operation of it. So it still had machine marks on the parts that go together, and it was basically locked all the way down. As soon as I hit something with the car, it threw all that power against the servo and stripped out the gears. My fault. I should have checked to make sure the bell cranks were working properly, so I'll take the hit on that one. Also, since it's a slider, we're going to need wheels and tires, and these are the factory wheels and tires for the Fireteam. So this is going to be a Fireteam from the ground up, which is very cool. We already have a body, and that's this one. Since we had a Fireteam before that we built into something else, we had the body left over. However, if you don't have one of those and you're buying a slider, you're going to need one of these. And this is an actual Fireteam body, and it has all the stuff in it. Now, we bought this on eBay as well. The thing about it is, these can be really expensive if you're not paying attention to who or what you're getting it from. So you have to look around to find a good price on it. We got this one for a fairly decent price. It was still over $100, but I did like the black camo, so we went ahead and got that as well. That being said, that's pretty much all we have to deal with. In this video, we're going to go ahead and put it all together. Let's get down on the bench and make it happen. Okay, so let's take the motor mount bracket out first, and there's 2 screws on the top here. We back those out, and this is what it looks like. So it's got a flat part on the top. Notice that little corner up there. Now we did have to put these 2 screws in. They did not come with the motor, so I had those, so we just used the screws that we had. But if you don't have those, you'll probably have to get your own. Always, when you're going metal to metal, use thread locker. So line this up top of the motor. Notice where the wires are, top of the motor. Now we're going to go ahead and put this on. But placement's important. You want to make sure and get this placed correctly so the wires and stuff fit the way they're supposed to. So that's the placement. There we go. Always torque everything by hand. Never use power tools to torque stuff. Always by hand. And you don't have to get super tough with that. Just tight works. So that's what it should look like. That's proper placement on the motor. Now you have 2 pinions here, a 12 and a 15 tooth. The 12 tooth right there, that's the one we're going to use. That's the bashing pinion. The other is a speed pinion. And as always, metal to metal, make sure you use thread locker because these will come loose. We've had that problem repeatedly where a pinion or some metal to metal part comes loose and it can really spoil your day. There you go. That should be pretty close. Now these brackets right here, they need to come off to get the motor in there without fighting things. So there's actually 3 items. There's this bracket on the outside, that one. So this is what it looks like. And then you've got that vertical upright. It looks like a spike. That one should come off as well. That's what it looks like. And this one screw sticks up where it will hit the motor and you can scratch your heatsink and all that stuff. So just back it out some and that'll give you some clearance, the clearance necessary to get the motor in. So let's go ahead and place it. It's a little bit of a struggle to get it down in there, but it does go just like that. Okay, so now we're going to get some thread locker on the bolts here. And you want to run them down close, but do not tighten them up because we need to adjust things. Okay, just like that. Now let's get them down close and then we'll pull it in. Now you want to leave a little space between the gears, not much, just a little bit, like the thickness of a sheet of paper is all you're looking for, and it will move when you tighten it up. So verify that it didn't walk before you tighten it all down. And then run the next one down. And make sure it didn't walk. We want to test everything again. And that thread locker, it does take 24 hours to set. So if you use thread locker and go right out and bash, it will do nothing for you. You definitely need to let it set. Let's have another look at the bottom here, and we're going to go ahead and tighten everything back up, put our parts back in place because the motor's now installed. So we'll run these down and get these connected. Beautiful. And this bracket has a flat spot on it that goes against the edge. It'll only go in one way, so I don't believe there's any wrong way to put it in. And it goes just like that. And now the motor's installed and the brackets are in place, and verify that they're snug. And we want to have a look at the leads.
All right, so now we got the motor installed. Now we're going to go ahead and have at the speed control. Now I like to set things up in a certain order when I'm building these, especially from a slider, because the speed control has a lot of wiring and stuff in it and it creates clutter, and so does the servo. Everything takes up space on that side. It's easier to work on the gearing, at least in my opinion, to put the motor and stuff in first to make sure that's all sitting the way it belongs. Now we're going to put the speed control in it, then we'll do this, then we'll do the servo in the front, then we'll add the radio. Normally I would set the batteries back to, because you can change them in this model and move them towards the rear, but we're going to save that for the upgrade video. We're going to put this together in a stock form. So the next thing in line, let's put that speed control in.
Okay, so first off, I want to take the radio box and get the lid off of it. So we're going to pull these 4 screws, and it looks like we're really ripping with this, but it's sped up. Always go slow with power tools because you can burn out the plastic and then things won't stay. So there's the one lead there. That lead goes to the rear servo, so we want to leave that open because we're going to need in there. And we'll start taking things apart. Now we need to get the floor off the bottom here and loosen that bracket because we need to get this bracket off. So there you go. And the reason is you have to run your wires underneath it to keep them from getting caught up in stuff. Let's get that new speed control out of the box. I always enjoy this part. Here we go. Be real careful with the wiring, as always. And let's look at alignment. So everything looks good, and the wires have to go by that bracket because they're going to get tucked into that. So that's the proper way to put it on. And we'll fit these on. And I've had both situations where I've put servo tape underneath it to try and help it down. It doesn't really make that big of a difference, but I think the foam underneath it can help hold heat, so we don't use the servo tape underneath these anymore unless that's the only way to restrain them. That's what it looks like. Very nice. Okay, so it places in the vehicle like this, and we want to get that wire linked through right like that. So it goes through that little bottom cleat, and that helps set it in the right direction for the radio box, so everything will go in the way it should, and you shouldn't have any problems with it getting tangled up in the driveline or any of that stuff. That's why you take the bracket out, and when you put this in, make sure that wire that is going underneath it right now from the third servo, we want to pull that out from underneath it. So let's go ahead and lift this up, and be real careful doing this. This is the water seal. So there's kind of a way to do this. You raise it up, you tuck your lead in, and then push it down. Let's hook up the off switch. And the nice thing about this BLX is it's designed for this car, so it goes right in. There's no modifications necessary. There we go. Don't over tighten anything into plastic. Feels good. Okay, we want to get those 4 screws back in to hold the speed control in place. And we've already pulled that lead for the third channel, the rear servo. We've already pulled that out from underneath it. Don't want to trap that under there. I just think it will look cleaner if it runs along the sides, so we're going to do that. Again, don't over torque the plastic parts. There we go. Nice and clean, just like that. Let's get these out of the way, and we'll go ahead and hook up the motor. So on the outside of the speed control towards the edge is the first line. We like to go to the bottom, so it's just as you see there. And this is okay to do it this way. We didn't check to see which one's which. These are not color-coded, so we won't know which ones to hook up. If you pull the trigger and it's running backwards, just switch 2 of the leads. So there you go, speed control's installed. Okay, let's get on with the servo installation now, and we want to just pull all the screws out. It's easier to get them out while they're still in the car than to take it out and try and do it with it in your hands. So we'll pull all 4 of these first. There we go. And taking a look at where the driver must be for the servo. So the driver's got to be set towards the front, and don't put the servo horn on yet because you have to use the one that comes with the servo. You can't use the one that comes in the car because that one has a different spline. And there's our bracket, and notice the tapers towards the front. Okay, so we always run into this when it comes to the servo because these are a lot bigger servo than what goes in it. Now it's just a matter of elevation. Now, it has a different spline, so you have to use the actual driver that goes with it, and of course that mounts on the top like so. So you have to use the one that comes with the servo because the splines are different. That's a small thing, and it's an easy changeover. At the same time, the height of the servo is different. So if you can see this, there's a difference of, looks like about 1/4 of an inch from the mount to the actual bottom of the servo, and that's if it's sitting up flush. Now, the way we normally do this, and you can get one that's the right size in the 25 kg range, but I like the 35s. They seem to hold up a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and elevate this like this, and that's going to leave a space right here at the ears. And we're going to build a block that goes right in there. Now, you can use a piece of plastic, you can use small washers, whatever. Make sure you have a decent screw that'll go, bolt that'll go down through that and hold it tight. But we've done this to a lot of them, and it holds up really well.
And so that's what we're going to go ahead and do here. One thing you want to keep in mind is this is a shaped bracket. So it's more square on one end, it's tapered on the other end. Don't forget the tapered end goes towards the front, and that's where you want your driver to be. So it should be towards the front at the driver where it's tapered. That's how these go in, because they'll have interference if you turn around and put them in backwards. Don't let that bite you. Make sure and line them up correctly. Now we're going to go ahead and build these blocks. We're just going to build the blocks off camera because they're just plastic blocks. And since we're using a different type of servo than should be in it, it's something you shouldn't have to do if you use the proper size servo. Still, it's just a block. It's not that hard to do. So we're going to get that done, and then we'll go ahead and finish the installation of this. All right, so there's the bracket, and we want to install the servo, and this can be a little bit tricky, but if you're really careful with your wiring and work it down inside, it does fit just like that. And that's standard size, but they can seem kind of tricky. And notice how this one doesn't actually fit the way the stock one did. All right, so we got the blocks built, and they are really simple. I'll get you a blow-up of this, should be right up here. And we've got 2 plastic blocks between the actual mount and the servo, and it was really simple to do. You can use just about any, like 3S arms are just about the right thickness. They're a little bit thick, you might have to shave them a little, but just cut a couple of pieces out, drill a couple of holes through them, and mount them on. And now it sits flat on the bottom. The servo's raised just about the thickness of 2 sheets of paper, so it won't sit on the chassis. It still will be on the stands, but everything mounted in just like it's supposed to, so that's encouraging. Also, alongside of that, these are the servo horns. Now, this is the one that comes with it, and of course, there'll be a picture up here, but look at the build on this. See the elevation change here? This lifts the arm up quite a bit. Okay, so this is a pretty good raise in the arm height. The one that comes with the 35 kg does not have that lift, which means it won't lift it as high. So this one lifting it up and this not lifting it up, we should be really close to the same elevation, so it should go right in with no problems. That's all very encouraging. And like I say, we've done this before, so I know it's going to work, but I just wanted to explain it to you before we got into it. Let's put it in the car. Okay, so we want to make sure and orient this properly, so the driver needs to be forward, and we need to make sure and keep the lead in a sanitary way. We don't want it to get bound up in stuff, so we'll run it through the bracket. And now we'll fish it underneath the chassis brace, and that's where you want to run all these, under the chassis brace, so that you don't get interference from the drive axle. Just like that. Position is good. And these are the bolts we're going to use to hold it onto the chassis, so let's go ahead and affix it to the chassis. And we are using a driver on this, but this is really sped up. We're going nice and slow because you don't want to create heat in the plastic. It'll keep things from holding, things will come apart. Slow is everything with power tools, and don't forget, always torque by hand. There we go. Let's have a look at it. Looks pretty good. Wait. Don't put that on yet, because we don't know where the servo is set. It's not centered, or it could be, but we don't know. So to avoid problems, we're going to leave it as is for now. Let's go ahead and run the wiring into the radio box. And this can be a little awkward sometimes, but these leads need to be standing vertically when they go through this slit. They can't go through flat. You have to make sure and stand them on edge, and that can take a little doing, but it is completely doable. And don't leave a lot of extra wiring outside the box. You want things to be nice and clean and to the point, and keep the extra lead inside the radio box. That keeps things from getting tangled up. See how that looks? Okay, so here is your receiver, and this is a 3-channel, and we want to use all these channels 1, 2, and 3. So first off, at the beginning, we want to find the steering servo, and that goes on the top slot, and it's marked on the receiver so you know where to plug things in. There we go, channels 1, 2, and 3, all good to go. Now hopefully this will come on the way it's supposed to. We're going to use a 3S battery because this speed control is capable of 3S, but since we're using 1, we need this loop connector. And we're going to use the DX5 Rugged as our radio here. So you push the button on the receiver and turn the car on and it'll flash like this. Turn on the radio. Now in this one you have to go down to the bind settings, so we'll scroll our way down there. There we go. Scroll down to bind and push the button. Now you just run through the quick setup. Notice how the light went solid. Now everything is working. Sweet. Even the third channel's working. Now we can install the servo horn onto the armature here, but do not put it on the radio until you get everything screwed down tight, because you want to make sure it stays where it belongs. Now this one happens to have a nut for the top. A jam nut is a good idea. It'll keep things from coming loose. There we go. And since we had the radio synced, the servo is in the centered position. Perfect. So as always, a little Loctite on this, but let's use removable on this to make sure that, and basically, come on guys, you should always use removable Loctite on this type of stuff, but make sure you get some Loctite on this so the servo horn stays in place. Now we'll give it a test. There we go, steering is good, the throw is good, nice. Okay, so I stopped and I took the battery box out with, this is actually the radio box on the front. And I paused in the middle of this to show you something that's, it can be confusing if you don't really know what's going on with this, and I don't like this design, but at the same time it does function. So this lump on this side right here, this is where the aerial connects, and there's a little grub screw right in the middle. So you back this grub screw out, let's take this out here. There's the grub screw. Okay, so that leaves you a slot. So there's a slot right here, and we'll get you a close-up of that. But there's a slot right here, so it allows you to put the aerial. Let's grab that. Don't want to lose that grub screw. Okay, so here's the aerial, and that plugs right in this on the front side, like so. So it plugs right into there. I don't know if you can see that, but that's where it goes. Now, you can take and run the aerial, the lead into the aerial like this. Okay, so you put your wire in from the receiver, and then the wire goes down into this slot, and then you plug this in like so, and that will hold it, and that'll keep your line nice and snug from, not snug, but close, between the receiver and the aerial so you can get to the top. Now the thing about it is, this little grub screw, when you put it back in, and don't put it in super tight. You don't want to pinch that wire in the bottom, but you want to put this in till it's just about zeroed out on the top of it, and the threads on the grub screw grab onto the aerial and hold it. So that's how you put your aerial together once you get it in the car. Now this can be in the car already and do that from the top side. The reason I took it out is because the close quarters in there and the way our cameras work here, I wasn't able to get right over the top and show you exactly how that works. So we're going to put this aerial in. You're going to see kind of a global view of it, but you won't be able to see the details. When we're down in there working, you'll know what we're doing. So let's get it all put back together. Okay, so now we want to peel this adhesive back off so that we can stick this down. And do not push down on the binding button. Push around it, make sure it's stuck down good, but don't push on that button. You could destroy it. Okay, with all those tucked in the way, now we're going to put the aerial in place, and we want to feed the lead up and through the aerial's tube. Run it through that link and down into the proper spot, and we'll get the aerial up. But we need to tuck that wire down into the horseshoes, so we'll just use a larger wrench driver and we'll gently push it down in the slot before we put this in. And that, of course, is the grub screw, which will hold everything in place. Do not crank it down tight, just run it down kind of flush so you don't pinch that aerial lead. We want to make sure that is undamaged. Also, do not pinch any of the wires when you put this on. This is really, you know, we've been there, we've done that. It sucks when you cut a wire in half because you get a little out of pocket putting something in. Be patient, make sure that you have everything tucked in neatly to avoid damage. There we go, and always, as always, torque by hand, never torque with machinery. There we go. That's looking really good. Beautiful. So let's get the wheels and tires on it now that the electronics are in place. And these wheels, they have a shoulder in there, which makes it a little difficult to get the nuts started, but it is doable. And also, with these tires, they're directional. Make sure they're heading the right direction. And the body fit right on it. Cool. All right, so there you go. That's the build for the Fireteam 6S slider, and this was the basic build as you saw in the video, and we really enjoy doing this kind of thing. Some of the coolest parts of doing that is being able to make things as sanitary as you can, putting things together, making sure your wires are routed good so it looks really clean when you're done. It just takes a little time and patience to go over that. In our first video, we called this a roller, but that was inaccurate, and it was one of our comments that came in and corrected us on that. A roller is the complete car, like this, without the electronics. No servo, no motor, no speed control, no radio. That's a roller. If you're missing the tires, wheels, body, and all that stuff, it's a slider. So thank you for correcting us on that one. We like to stay accurate. I know it's just a terminology, but at the end of the day, a roller and a slider are different. So thank you for that. One thing about this though is pinion size, and this we looked it up. The stock one is 12 and 15, and the difference between those, if you're curious about how gearing works, check out Gearing 101. It's in our playlist, but the difference between that is the 12 tooth is designed to move this weight. That's what it's designed for with the stock motor, which is a 2050 with the standard speed control, and 3 to 6S if you use the BLX speed control. Now the thing about that is, for bashing, hopping around in tough situations, just constantly on and off the throttle, running in different traction variants, lots of cornering, lots of full throttle. The 12 tooth is designed to move that without overheating the internal gearing. So what that means is, and what I mean by that is, it won't draw as many amps through the battery because the gearing is smaller. It gives it more torque, which means it handles the load better. It does limit the speed because it's a smaller dimension on the pinion, so every revolution moves the car less, but at the same time, if you're going to be on and off the throttle all the time, you can overheat the motor and the speed control, and if you hit a certain temperature with that, you can melt some of the components inside of it and ruin that gear. So, and what I mean the gear is the motor and the speed control, not the gear itself. Now, that's the bashing pinion. Now, if you put the 15 tooth on it, yeah, it's more impressive to watch, but mind your temperatures because that one's not actually designed for bashing. That's for big, flat, groomed areas where you can get some full speed up and run it
but you're not constantly on and off the throttle. You're not trying to bounce through areas. The traction variant is pretty consistent. But even if you're going to run the 15-tooth pinion, don't forget to get in there and check your temperatures, because you can still overheat things. That's the speed pinion, not designed for bashing. The 12-tooth is the bashing pinion. So take that into account when you are deciding which gear to put in it. It comes with the 12, and the 12 seems to be pretty good for bashing. Also, there's a difference between the slider and the stock one. Now, the thing about that is, we'll go over the costs here in a few minutes, but the slider is just the running gear. So that's the chassis, all the stuff that you saw in our first video, that's the slider. Now, the thing about that is, this did, after we did the math, did actually come out to be more expensive than buying a stock version RTR with all the new stuff in it. But at the same time, that's not overly important if you plan to pull all the stuff out of it. And what I mean by that is, you buy an RTR, it's ready to go. You check the differentials, make sure things are good, and then you pull the motor, speed control, change the radio, all that stuff. You want to upgrade the servos. That's all of the internals. You might as well buy a roller instead of buying a full one, because you don't have to pull all that stuff out. You can buy the components you want to put in it and drop it in there. Now, you're going to spend more for a roller than you will a slider. But if you take into account the cost of the body, and let's say perhaps you don't want to use this body. This is a 7th scale chassis, so you can put any number of things on it with some adaptation. So you can change the weighting, all of that stuff. So if you don't want to build a stock one, it makes sense to buy a slider so you can create whatever you want. The beauty of this platform is the parts are more or less interchangeable between vehicles. You can put parts off of this car and that car and this car on it and build something that you want to have that they don't actually offer on the market. If you want one of these, buy an RTR, because that one's going to be more cost effective. You're not going to change the radio, motor, speed control, any of the electronics. You're just going to take it out and have a good time with it. That's what the RTR is for. But if you want a custom one, if you want to build something that is truly your own, you can get a slider and save all of that work and the money, because like I say, the basic cost was about $222 for the slider. Buy your motor, speed control, servos, radio. Put it together and you're good to go on that. Then you can select your tire options and your body options. And if you're a wrench monkey like I am, you like to get on the bench and make stuff out of stuff, that's really the way to go. Also, one other item before we get into the total costs here is the difference in the radios. Now, the RTR comes with one of these. And this is a DX3. This is a great RTR radio. This one comes with a lot of the different ones, and this one's got some really cool features about it. The 3rd channel's right here on your thumb. Makes it really easy to get a hold of. This one also has control over your gyro and your braking function right there, so you can turn the brakes up and down for overall braking. And it's got this little bind button right here, which binds it to the receiver super easy. Push this button, hold it on. After you've done the same thing, which we showed you how to do in the video, push this button, hold it on. It will find the receiver. Then you have to go through your basic setup. Full throttle, brakes, turn, turn, and then it'll set and you're good to go. The upside is, when we bound this one, we bound it to the rugged. And this is kind of a more specialty kind of radio, because once you get into the menu on this thing, there is a myriad of options that you have in there, and they're not all easily understood what they are and how they do it. And when you first bind to one of these, you can realize your speed's not up. You have to get into the settings and jack up the travel and all that stuff to make it do what you want it to. So these are a bit more complicated to play with, but they have a lot more settings in them. This is a lot more expensive also. So if you're going to just put a radio in it that will handle it, the DX3 that comes with the RTRs does a great job. So as promised, let's go over the total cost for the project. Now, the Fireteam slider came in at a solid $222, give or take some change, which was 76 cents. We had the 2050 motor for $65.84. The BLX 185 came brand new at $119.85. The receiver, the SR315, came in for $54.99. The Spectrum DX3, we were able to find more than one at this price on eBay, and of course everything was from eBay, that was $34.99 for this. And that's crazy low price for something like that. So that was very cool. Also, we bought two VTech 35 kg servos, which the 35s require that adjustment that we put into this one. Personally, I think that's worth it. We got two of those for $38.20, and that's an everyday price on eBay, which is amazing. We have those in a lot of different vehicles here. The body itself in the black camouflage, which is a really cool looking body. Factory black camo come in for $115.47, and you can find those for a lot higher price. So be careful where you shop, be careful who you're looking at. Look at their ratings to make sure they're a decent vendor and order accordingly if you're going to shop on eBay. We've had really good luck there. We aren't sponsored by eBay. This is just where we get a lot of our parts because multiple vendors means you get to select who you buy from. Really cool on that one. Also, the tires and wheels. Okay, these are the factory tires and wheels that go to this car, and we got a set of 4 for $75.99 shipped to the house. Now, that brings us to a total of $728.09, give or take, because I didn't count the servo tape to put that in. I didn't count a couple of screws that we needed to fix a couple of spots. When we changed the servo in the receiver, we needed longer screws or bolts, however you want to look at it. And we happen to have a big drawer of that stuff, so I was able to dig those out. But if you don't have those, you may have to look into that as well. Overall, though, right under $730, you can get into one of these. Now, here's the difference. You can buy an RTR right now, as of the making of this video, on AMain Hobbies for $649.99, and that seems to be pretty average throughout the market. Some people are asking more, but that's what AMain is selling them for. So that's your basic RTR, and you get everything you need to play with this. Check a few things out, make sure things are working the way they should be, and you're good to go. And if you want to run a stock one, that's the more affordable way to do it. But if you're gonna build something custom, that's where you want to look at the difference. And the difference is $78.10 between the RTR and the slider we put together. Now, these are all priced off of eBay vendors, which means those prices vary, and I can't give you the links to them because I bought those parts. So you're going to have to find them on your own if you want to do this. Is it worth the $78 to build it yourself? Well, if you're like me, the answer is absolutely yes, because you'll be able to upgrade and modify and do stuff without having to tear a bunch of parts out of it that you didn't need to pay for. So that can be a lot more advantageous. But if you just want to run one, definitely buy the RTR. So if you haven't already, don't forget to bash that like button and help our content spread. You know, we enjoy doing this kind of thing, and sometimes, especially for new people to the hobby, which this channel has always been geared towards, this is something that you've thought about but never really paid attention to. You kind of thought about building your own, but you didn't know what the cost differences were going to be. If you shop careful, you can get right in there. If you have parts that will work, that will also save you some money. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just need to see how it's done to understand whether it's something you want to take on, and that's what this here video was about. Don't forget that we do have memberships here at the channel, and it's not about the money. And don't get that wrong, it is to a certain point. We don't make a lot of money here at the channel. This is just something we're doing to help our community. Do we make enough? Well, we make enough to where every other month we can buy an RC. That's about where that goes. We're not sponsored, so we don't have the big money coming in that a lot of channels do, but we're not doing it for that reason. The memberships simply mean that if you like the content we're putting out here at the channel, please get into the memberships and join up. It doesn't have to be an expensive one. It can be the small one, whatever it is, but everyone that joins that helps us afford to do this kind of thing. That vehicle right there was $730 out the door. We're not complaining, we're doing it because we want to, but it taps the wallet, and in today's society, things are really expensive, and every little bit of help that we get is awesome, and we thank all of our members always for jumping in there and helping us afford to keep this going. We've been off offline for a while here because Tina and I were both going through some health issues. Worry not, we got into a really bad dose of the flu, way worse than anything we'd run into before, and it was just a flu. But it lasted for 6 weeks or more to try and get that cleared up so that we could get back. Literally 3 days ago, I could hardly talk. And it was one of those things to where, how do you get on camera when you sound like a frog? It's just not okay. So we had to wait it out and get through this. And thankfully, we're doing so much better. And a special thanks to everyone that got in the comments, all of your inspiring words to us. That made so much difference. We have the best community ever. We hardly get anything negative. You guys are awesome, and we really appreciate that. Now, as far as that goes, we were talking about comments. If you see questions in the comment section, and that's what this channel is for and how we want the comments to work. If you see a question in the comments that you know the answer to, please get in there and answer the question. People don't need to wait days for us to be able to see it, because sometimes we don't see the comments for quite a while. But if you can help them, they need those questions answered right now. And every time you answer a question and you help someone else, it makes our community that much stronger. And it's awesome. If you have anything you'd like to add to this video, please feel free to get down in the comments below and help others along the way. Hey, for AJ Jam Studios, I'm AJ saying, keep wrenching.